Okay, you want to do it right. And your core team here, your commercial agents I've mentioned, you want a great solicitor, a commercial property solicitor, planning consultant, absolutely fundamental. Get one of those on your accounting system now, because when you need one, you need one. You don't want to be waiting a fortnight for them to find a space for you. So build a relationship with one early. Valuers, brokers, your tax accountants, advisors, design team, QSs, contractors, and estate agents, because hey, guess what? You might want to sell the units at the back end. So we're not ignoring estate agents. And some commercial agents are estate agents, and some estate agents have got commercial agent wings. So let's not ignore them. When you're creating that relationship, you don't just want commercial property. You actually also need somebody to sell those units. Flip it the other way. They're careful and cautious how they bring somebody with a commercial, bring commercial units to developers. But equally, they want to retain the sale of those units as well. So again, walk a mile in their shoes and work out what their economic equation looks like. Because the chances are, you know, if you offer something to them that's more economically viable, you'll have a more sensible conversation, because they'll appreciate you've done some due diligence on their model. This is one in Wright Street in Hull. This one legally completes tomorrow for us. This one's been a bit torrid, I have to be honest. It's not a counselling session, but it could be if I went into all the details on it. It's been a long time. Grade 2 listed. We acquired this one in our pension. Remember I said in our SAS pension? So we bought it in a trust. Grade 2 listed. We got full planning, 18 apartments. We're now selling this into our own SPV. Our own SPV, which has a private investor, and we have a split shareholding on that SPV. I'll talk about what an SPV is later. We used a conditional exchange there. That was a 12-month conditional exchange. Told you it was quite torrid. There's a whole hatful of capital allowances, probably close to 200,000 there, should we wish to retain it. So a really interesting development for us. Give you an idea. GDV's a lot lower, bearing in mind it was 2.7 million down in Essex, 16 apartments. This is 18, 2 million quid, 17 one-beds and 1 two-bed with a whole stack of car parking in the rear. Purchase price was pretty much 50% of the one in Colchester. But the refurbishment is not too dissimilar, and you'll find this. Land values are poles apart as you go north, but you won't find the contractors' returns too different. There might be, 5 to 15% difference, but not 50, 60, 70%, 100% increase. So, a nice third of a million return there. And we then calculate the return on capital employed over a term for our investors as well as for ourselves on a time basis. So planning. Planning is our friend. There is a need out there. Planning is there to serve a need as well as be custodian of the local environment, as we know. Most of you put your hands up and mentioned you knew about permitted development rights. Permitted development rights is not something that every local planning authority will allow. Okay, I live near Guildford, just north of Guildford in South Berkshire. There's a town called Bracknell. Bracknell have stopped permitted development in the area. Does anybody know the instrument they use to stop permitted development, to opt out?
Article 4.
Article 4, yeah. So who does HMOs here? Yeah, so you'll be familiar with Article 4. So that's what they use. Typically, or not all the time, but Class B1A offices. And we have also seen on the 1st of October the advent of light industrial class B1C, or Class PA as it's known. So you can use permitted development rights, and it gives a phenomenal potential, huge potential. However, you may not just use permitted development. You may try and use something else. I've said here the path least trodden. What do most parties look for, most developers look for on a permitted development opportunity? It's generally vacant possession. But you may wish to take a building that's still got a tail end of a lease. You could look at taking one that's still got maybe 1, 2, 3 years, and that's what we're doing with our SACC. We're trying to acquire property that's still got a couple of years left on a lease. That's great. Cash flows nicely. We can get great leverage in our SACC, and we can then take that opportunity in a very considered way to investigate the planning and really try and add some incremental value and force some appreciation into that property. So can you see all these different strategies you can have?
Never thought about it.
Yeah.
We always think, well, if it's not empty, then we have to wait a year until we can get planning, so we don't want it.
Yeah.
Never thought about this side.
And that's a different way of trying to thin yourself away from the herd and try and becoming more and more exclusive. So this was just an example on planning. If you're permitted development, it's about 100 quid, 80 quid plus that to put in a permitted development application. So you remember Oak House in Colchester? 80 quid for permitted development. Wright Street in Hull is £400 per unit. There were actually 18 on Wright Street, so best part of £7,000, plus the VAT as well. And the outcome, instead of 56 days, the outcome was 8 to 13 weeks, depending whether the planners call it a minor or a major scheme. Did they take 13 weeks? Sadly for us, no. It was about 43 weeks. But we got there eventually. That's why these odd go faster stripes, bit of grey hair exist. Wright Street. You can see the risk profile of each one of the different strategies. So think carefully. You'll be in with the masses with permitted development if they're on market. But if you can try and differentiate your strategy, then potentially you won't be fishing in quite such a stagnant pond. Don't get me wrong, there are opportunities all around in all of these strategies. You've just got to make sure you don't try and service every one of those markets. You've got to focus. Just quick one on design optimization. There are minimum standards that you have to apply. Square meterage of different apartments. Okay? So with permitted development you get exemption rights on a lot of those. What did I say earlier on about walk a mile in another person's shoes? Who are we concerned about? Somebody's got to buy these apartments, if that's our strategy. So it's the buyer. So walking a mile in the buyer's shoes, the buyer, Mr. and Mrs. Jones, linking pinkies, walking into their new apartment. The chances are they're probably going to want a mortgage. So you'll hear lots of strategies about micro apartments in London and some of the great stuff that Martin Skinner's doing out there. Small apartments, 23 to maybe 26 square metres. Great strategy, but it's a different strategy, okay, because he's not splitting them and selling them. So there are a very few mortgage companies who you could get a mortgage for an apartment under 30 square metres. But remember that phrase, you'll be fishing in a stagnant pool, or your buyers will be. So you want to make it easy and streamlined for your units to be purchased and therefore you to sell them. So this is an RICS Red Book valuation. That is what all commercial funders, credit committees will want you to have. So the bank won't loan you a bean. They won't loan you a bean unless you've got an RICS Red Book valuation. And that's what one looks like, or 2 pages of it. Costs you 4,000 quid to see that. You know, the likes of Savills or Knight Frank will relieve you of your children's hard-earned inheritance, about £4,000. What I would do for you, and this is a tip, would it not be a good idea to understand what bank grade due diligence looks like rather than have a stab at it yourself? So get yourself an RICS Red Book valuation. Find one on the internet, speak to somebody, blag a copy, try and get your hands on one and work out exactly how they value a property. Because quite frankly, when you do your due diligence, okay, your opinion's worthless. The funder will only lend on what the Red Book valuation is produced on. Okay, so find out by what criteria they measure it, and you'll have a pretty good chance of not having too many surprises when your development gets valued by the valuer. Is that helpful? Because it should be that. That is what. I don't know why more people don't do it. Okay.
Sorry, what's it called?
It's an RICS, the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors Red Book valuation. So the Red Book is the code of conduct by which RICS surveyors have to appraise commercial property.
But if we go with private investors, do you still suggest to look at this Red Book?
Almost always it'll be a blend of senior debt from the banks and private investors. Occasionally you may find I've got a couple at the moment, private investors who for one reason or another don't want the banks involved and they just want they'll fund the whole thing, the purchase and the development. Cherish those kind of private investors. They're quite a handy breed to have, but they know the value of their money. And probably what they're really looking for is a first charge security on their money. Okay. So commercial finance, we're having to really skip through this because I know I'm late on time. Am I still okay?
Yeah, that's fine. It's much value add here. So.
Okay. Is that okay? I've got a few more slides.
Yeah.
You need senior debt. That's going to be somewhere between 50 and 80% of your cost. You may bring mezzanine in and then you'll need your private investors, your joint venture money. Okay? Anticipate what things look like, the structuring. Okay, this is the funding overview on a £1.2 million development. You'll bring in generally senior debt at 70 to 80%, and generally that's a low return for the bank because it's low risk. My heart bleeds, they're only making 4 to 10%. Mezzanine, that'll probably have a second charge, and that'll take the loan to cost up to no more than 90%, probably 85%. A higher risk, so therefore a higher return for the bank. Then your equity or your private capital, that'll bring in the rest, whatever that and that, whether that adds up to 85, 90%, the rest will come in there. And then the rest is profit. So when it all goes pear-shaped, God forbid, the first thing that feels pain is your profit goes, then your equity feels the pain, then your mezzanine, and finally your senior debt. This is Kelvedon House. This is a land development. This is the front of the property, which is here. And then we had half an acre out the back and we're just getting planning permission there. So it works in land developments as well as commercial conversions. This one's about 2.6 million and again got a nice healthy return. Joint ventures. I used to be a corporate troubleshooter around the world as part of my additional duties in corporate life. And I've seen some pretty harrowing things. I've had to investigate fatalities, bank overruns, breach of bank long stops, managing directors just going disappearing elsewhere in the world. So I've seen a lot of things happen. Many of the consequences, if you follow the root cause analysis as an engineer back, you'll find it came from badly structured joint ventures. Has anybody here ever had a bad experience or knows somebody who's had a bad experience on joint ventures? Only 2. Okay, I'm in a good room. Just watch out, okay? Sometimes things can be not always what they might seem. Do your due diligence on people, on process, on systems. Don't trust anything, don't leave anything to chance, okay? So this is about no alignment of objectives and poor communication. You know, there's a lot of issues here. I'm going to skip through this, but just to say, if you think it's great, to do lots of swearing on Facebook and F this and F that, I suggest you think again. Your banks are starting to do due diligence. Your private investors are doing due diligence. Your private investor might love you swearing, might love you. What I find is when things have gone pear-shaped and you're in the trenches with your tin hat on, your bayonet on your rifle, generally people want you to be calm under pressure. If you're an emotional, volatile creature that flares up at everything and values people hating you and this that, and the other, look, when the chips are down and it really gets ugly, okay, be calm. Your private investor will want a calm party who can work through the process, work through the systems, understand what challenges need to be met and resolve it. And more importantly, your bank will want that as well. I have a little phrase here. Your largest investor you never had is the one you never knew was watching. Okay, I can't, so many times I've had people call me to say, Mark, been watching you for a year, can we have a coffee? Okay, if they didn't like what they saw, and I'll never know how many haven't contacted me, by the way, but if they didn't like me, or they just didn't like what I put out there on social media, too much swearing or whatever, they just wouldn't contact me. I'd never know. So don't get carried away in the hype of emotion of what other people judge as good. Follow your own gut instinct. And there's a lot of shiny things out there that will distract your attention. This is Frank Williams of Williams Motorsport. He used to say this to everybody who brought him an invoice, a purchase order, a requisition. Does it make my car go faster? He knew his only mission in life was to make sure that Williams Motorsport car went the fastest round the track. And if something didn't directly contribute to fulfilling the goal and the values of the company, quite frankly, it wasn't in his top 1, 2 or 3 priorities. So use that challenge to yourself. Does it make my car go faster on everything you do? Whether it be reading Facebook or doing, whatever it is. And we've had this recently with augmented and virtual reality. Looks great, fantastic, but is it actually going to sell our units quicker now, here, today? And I'm not going to judge that one way or another, but challenge yourself. If you try and have bells and whistles on everything, it may not be the best way. You want that path of least resistance, be sleek. General communication, if you want one of these, it's not a brochure, it's a newsletter. We do this every quarter, generally aimed at our private investors, but I've got a few there. If you want to take a copy, actively communicate to your private investors. Okay, they want to understand a bit about you, what you do, how you do it, the values that you stand by. Okay, there's no reason why any of you can't put a 2, 3-page, 4-page flyer together. Okay, people need to connect with you on a regular basis, and you can't meet all your private investors all the time. Bit of feedback on ours. There's some opportunity here. Yes, they're for sophisticated investors. We've got the FCA 13 health warnings here. Okay, but our private investors said, well, you're not giving us any opportunity to invest. Well, we duly complied and gave them the opportunity. Okay, that was a direct question from them. Tax, be aware of it. The only word I want you to remember is cash flow here. Cash flow, cash flow, cash flow. What is the reason most businesses go out of business?
Cash flow.
Lack of cash flow. I remember I said earlier on, I used to be a free-fall skydiver. It's called ground rush. If you've not pulled your chute and you're admiring the ground and you're at about 2,500 feet, it's going to be painful even if you remember to pull the chute. Okay, that ground rush is a bit like cash flow. The world feels 1,000,000 miles away until it's not. And 2,000 feet, that ground comes awfully fast at you. When you start running out of cash, the bottom of your bank account will just come at you. So preserve your cash as though your life depends on it, because it probably will. Yeah, it's the oxygen in your lungs. Please don't let the bank tell you how much private capital you need. CDM, don't forget health and safety, it's paramount. Title splitting. you're going to want to sell the units. You've got to title split them, 99, 125 year or 999 years generally. Okay? There are going to be 4 elements that value the freehold. Take note of those: ground rent, service charge, terms of lease and enhanced value potential. And that completes the overall model. I'll race through a bit at the end because honestly I haven't gone over time at all, have I?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yes.
Mark, thank you very much for the presentation. It sounds awful lot complicated to me. I understand you got 8 people working for you, or the team. So could you briefly describe what the function of the people in your team, how they handle all the perspectives?
Yeah, so really good. So there's 4 of us are directors of Equa Group. I look after the private investors and I do the training stuff with Equilife. Mike brings the institutional funding to bear, Nigel finds the properties, and Phil delivers the developments themselves. So we have 4 key roles there, and then we have 4 of our younger members. They're between sort of 21 and 24 years old, and we're nurturing those, so we're training them up as part of the custodianship of our legacy. But they look after our HMO portfolio, bit of serviced accommodation. They do a lot of the monitoring and quite a bit of the quantity surveying as well. And due diligence as well. So gradually we cycle those around, but 4 of us, we take the lion's share of the developments. Yes.
And out of curiosity, is it what kind of company is it? A limited company?
It is.
LLP?
Holding company is a limited company. Our strategy at the moment for the next year is to buy, develop, sell. The most efficient strategy for us, or structure for us, is limited company SPVs. However, at a point where, to be honest, I only really think there's one reason why you would want to have an LLP, and that's if you were to introduce capital allowances. But that's my personal view. Everybody's tax is different, so never judge anybody else by their structure. Their decisions are always based on their own circumstances. And another bit of advice, when you're looking at structure and get the advice from your tax advisor and accountant, please tell them the whole picture about what you're interested in. If you take them Oak House in Colchester and say, how should I structure that? You're giving them partial information and you'll probably get partial advice. So try and lay out your other business interests, because that will have a bearing on probably the advice that's given. Have we got time for one more?
Yeah, just one more. I think we'll probably wrap up and we can continue after them.
Is there one more? Yes, Darren.
After you changed the building from freehold to leasehold, who owns the leasehold? Does your holding company?
No, you would only generally split freehold, leasehold if you were selling, and you would generally only split that at the point of sale. If we were retaining, then we would just own the freehold of the property, not on a non-title split basis. It costs a little bit of money. It probably costs £500, £600, £700 to do the legals of a sale, and also similar amount to do the title splitting. So you only want to split if you're going to sell them. And most commercial, if you're refinancing and holding a block, most banks and most funders are aware, don't think you can title split each individual unit and put a residential unit on each individual. That's yesteryear's game. You know, banks are a little bit wiser than that now.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Mike.
Okay.
So impressive.
Thank you.